IT Fundamentals Plus, Module 4, Unit 2, Connecting to a Network. The objectives for these lessons are: identify the roles of different network devices in providing local and internet network connectivity, distinguish the advantages and disadvantages of internet connection types, connect a computer to a wired or a wireless network, and configure a wireless access point or wireless router to use secure network settings. When it comes to internet service types, one of the most common is what is referred to as a SOHO, S-O-H-O, which stands for a small office, home office. And this is, again, the type of device that you would find in many homes or small offices. It's a device that combines several features. So it's a multi-function appliance. You get a switch, an access point, and the internet, the router or the modem, as we call it. So the switch is basically what allows you to connect, computers. In most home routers, you can connect up to 4 computers using an RJ45 using wire, right? Typically the twisted pair cabling. The access point or the Wi-Fi router is what allows you to connect, your mobile devices without using wire, right? And then the router portion of it is what allows you to connect that network in your house to the internet through what is called a one link. So, and again, this is very typical in homes and in small offices. So what device is used to connect computers together in an Ethernet network? And the answer is a switch. So in this layout over here, we have a router and then a switch. So the router connects to the switch, and then the switch is where you connect those devices. And again, this is a very typical layout of a small office or an enterprise, you could say. But this is a very simple network. Now, as I just mentioned, in a lot of home or small offices, the router and the switch are basically combined into one device. The three of the most common ways to connect to the internet are using a digital subscriber line, DSL, which is not as popular as it used to be, is a broadband over copper telephone cabling, router modern interfaces with telephone network via the RJ11 port. It uses a symmetric DSL or ADSL with up to 24 Mbps download and 1.4 Mbps upload. Again, that used to be very popular, not anymore. Fiber optic to the home. It's a very fast type of connection. It's available in some areas, especially in the cities, but not everywhere. But again, this is becoming more and more popular. And obviously, the more popular, common ways to access the internet is using, a cable modem. Cable access, TV, right, also gives you access to the internet. Uses a cable, router modem interface with network via coax F connector. Or in a lot of this newer modems actually use HDMI to connect. But again, just to connect to, let's say, your devices, but you still need that coax F connector cable. Data over cable service interfaces specifications, what is called DOC SIS. A lot of technical terminology that at this point you don't actually need to understand or worry about. None of that technical stuff it's going to be in the IT fundamentals exams anyways. So can you list at least 4 internet access methods? So again, DSL, it's one way, or using cable modem. right? Satellite, it's another way, especially in rural areas, and cellular radio. So you could basically use your cell phone, you can use that as a modem and then access the internet through that as well. What is the difference between a modem and a router? Modems are very rarely used nowadays. So basically a router is the way to go. But a modem basically creates a serial link between two computers over some sort of long distance media. It operates at the data link layer. A router makes a foreign decisions between logical networks, and it does not need to make account for framing and transmission detail, that kind of stuff. But anyway, so modems are, especially in the US, something of the past. But it used to be very common that people use a modem and dial a telephone number, and then that's the way that we used to connect to the internet. It's not a popular way to connect to the internet anymore. If you look at the bottom right corner of your Windows computer, you can basically identify right away whether you are having a connection problem. Because if you are disconnected or there's some kind of issues, you'll see some signs of that nature, whether it is a red circle with a white X in the middle, or that yellow triangle indicating that there's some sort of an issue. So that's what the network status icon it's all about. It could be a problem with the IP address, basically mean that you're not getting a proper IP address. And there are ways to perform a simple task. Actually, if you open a web page and it doesn't open, obviously something is wrong. And we'll demo some of that stuff later on. So microwave satellite, it's a way to connect to the internet. Not very common, but some people where there is no cable modem or DSL availability, sometimes this is the way that they connect. The reception dish, it has to be aligned with orbital satellite, usually available even in rural areas. They have high latency. There's a packet delay. And again, so you need what is called a DVB-S, a video digital broadcast satellite modem, in order to connect with that. And not many people use that, but again, it's available. Cellular radio transmitter or base station service cells are up to about 5 miles in kilometer. So again, these are like the traditional, cellular radio that our phones use. The technologies used, GSM, Global System for Mobile Communication. It's very popular, and some of the stuff can provide data service as well as voice. Again, this is what we normally use. And so some key terms over here: the GPRS and Edge. Evolve high-speed packet access, CDMA. It's kind of like an old technology that not many companies use anymore. The more popular are the long-term evolution, LTE, and there are several versions of that. But anyway, so just some terminology over there that not important to really go over detail on this, but at least to understand these concepts. Radio frequency, we use Wi-Fi networking, which is very popular, and also the open public access points. There are a lot of these that whenever you go to places and stuff like that where you can connect. Not very safe to do that, but anyway, so we can use radio frequency to we use these technologies nowadays to connect to the internet. Now, when it comes to wireless standards and compatibility, the latest standard and the one that you want to use is the 802.11ac. Is the fastest, and it has more security features. So basically, it's a wireless LAN or wide LAN Wi-Fi standard. And again, it's referred to as the technology of the IEEE 808.11, It's basically Wi-Fi. And then you have 11A, B, G, N. Those are old technologies. The newer ones again is 802.11ac. Access point can support a mix of clients with adapters for different standards. In other words, you can mix match if you have an old laptop, let's say, that has one of those old wireless technology. Compatibility modes can reduce the performance though. So in other words, if you have old devices, you need to set your modem for those devices, then that could kind of impact the performance of your network. So what is the latest Wi-Fi standard and which frequency band does it use? The latest is IEEE 802.11ac, and it works in the 5 gigahertz band. Most 802.11ac access points do also have the 2.4 gigahertz radius, but they use them to support legacy standards. So again, if you have an old laptop that you are connecting to your network, you have to use that the 2.4 gigahertz band. So how do we configure an access point, like a wireless router? Well, every wireless router will have some admin interface that you go through an IP address. So depending on the brand name, whether it is Linksys or Link or whatever it is, you should read the instructions on how to connect. But there's going to be an IP address. You go to that web page, and then it's going to have some kind of credentials, the default ones, usually admin and password or just admin, and then you can configure a number of things like the set ID or SSID, which is basically the name of your network. And also you can change here the compatibility mode and all kinds of stuff. Important to state over here that when you are putting the name to your network, you do not give any name that will identify you. Okay, so I've seen a lot of network where people use their own name. Basically, if someone is snooping around, because remember, these networks are, they use radio frequencies, so they will be available. Anyone that's nearby on the street or your neighbor, they will see those networks. And then if it has your name, then people know, oh, this is this person's name. People try to mess around. So in terms of security, you should never give out information to identify yourself. Try to give a name that you would remember, but that nobody else, your neighbors, would not know that is you. So what information do you need to configure a wireless connection manually? Again, it's the SSID. It stands for the Service Set ID, which is the network name, basically. When you set this up, you also need to choose an encryption type and an authentication information, okay? And then you put your key, whatever that may be. Make sure that that key is not that simple, so that, if someone wants to break your network, it will not gonna be easy for them to do. All right. When configuring wireless security, again, we talked about the encryption. Encryption basically means that if someone were to capture those packages, they would not be able to make sense of them because they are cipher scrambles messages, right? And the key allows the receiver to reverse the cipher and unscramble them. And so your devices are able to scramble and to encrypt and decrypt those messages. But if someone were to capture those messages, they would not be able to do that. So again, wireless security standards are WEP, Wi-Fi, and WPA. The least secure is the WEP, Wire Equivalent Privacy. The most secure of these three, it's the WPA2, and that's what you should choose when you are setting up your wireless router. And then the pre-shared key authentication phrase is the password that you use to basically connect to your wireless network. Open authentication and captive portals are usually used in public places like when you go to the mall and all those stores at the mall, open authentication disables encryption, which is not good. It is used by public access points, as I just said. Maybe secondary authentication by a captive portal is where you have to enter your name, email address, and that kind of stuff, and then you can connect. But anyway, connecting to a public wireless network nowadays is dangerous. You don't know who's behind that network. They could have software in which anything that you put over there. So in my recommendation, if you decide to connect to a public network, do not use this network to connect to any place where you have to enter personal information. Don't do banking, don't connect to your Facebook. If you just want to read the paper, that's fine. And even though it still is dangerous. So my recommendation is, if you can avoid, do not use public access points. So how do we configure a wireless client, whether a laptop or a phone? Well, you go to that wireless connection, and you're going to see the names of the wireless if you recognize it. Be careful with this, especially in public networks, because one of the things that the crooks do is cyber criminals. They use the concept what is called the evil twin. An evil twin is a network name that is similar to a legitimate name, but it's not. So if you go to, let's say, to the mall and you see the name of a store, you don't know. Somebody could be sitting down somewhere with a laptop with malicious software, create a fake network, and then when you connect to that network, basically anything that you do on that network, they use what is called sniffing traffic tools, and everything that you click. If we go to the internet and you put your username and password, they are able to capture that. So be extremely careful when you connect to public networks. What is the risk of using a free Wi-Fi network to make an order from an online shop? Again, data on an open network may be intercepted by the person running the network or by any other malicious individuals that may be sitting down over there. You need to ensure that the online store uses a secure HTTPS connection when you do that. But even though, again, it's not recommended to connect to public networks like that. One concept that it's important to understand when it comes to networking is the speed limitations, which is basically attenuation and interference. Wi-Fi indoor range is normally up to about 30 meters, which is 100 feet. Signal attenuates or diminishes, right? It's reduced at longer range. The dynamic rate switching selection, or DRS, reduces data rate or range to preserve a reliable connection. Radio waves are weakened or blocked by dense material, or concrete and metal. So what that means is that people come, oh, my internet is very slow, and so they have a cable modem that is in the basement in a closed, space with a lot of walls in it. Obviously, your internet connection is going to be very slow. For optimal performance, you should place the modem in your house in a location that it's not, again, blocked by this walls and fences. So interference from other networks and radios also may have an impact. So like if you have a wireless phone, or if you have even a doorbell, a wireless doorbell, any of those devices may interfere with your network connection. So what does attenuation mean? It basically describes the loss of a strength of a signal the further that it has to travel. Attenuation sets the distance limitations on different network media types. Now, when it comes to an enterprise, this is a typical, switch, a flood wire cabling and network wall port. So basically, you have a connection, then you have a switch with many ports, right? Enterprise-grade switches accommodate many connections in a single port. And then if you need more than that, then you have, you can connect a switch to another switch, right? And again, so in big companies, you have thousands of connections connected to this network devices. Wireless enterprise network, again, they are the same Wi-Fi standard that you would find in a home network, but they are basically enterprise grade access points instead of those wireless routers that you get at home. Kind of the same technology, but again, a little bit different. You know, they're designed for an enterprise. Here is the view of a router, right? So you have the internet connects to the router connects to one or many switches, and then those switches are used to connect your hosts, your computers, and that kind of stuff. Switch supports are placed in logical groups using what's called virtual LANs or VLANs. Each VLAN is assigned to an IP subnet, and we'll talk more about this as we move on. Communication between subnets go via a router, so most of the time that's, even though you could use switches and create VLANs and stuff like that, but the whole concept is that you have a router and then you have switches, and then if you want to create another subnet, then you just join that router to another one, and therefore. All right, so this is the end of this unit. What did we learn? We learned to identify the roles of different network devices in providing local and internet network connectivity, distinguish the advantage and disadvantage of internet connection types. We actually didn't learn to connect a computer to a network. We talked about the connection between wires and stuff like that, but we will do some demos in some labs where we actually see how that works. And the final, we talked about the configuration of a wireless access point, but again, just the concept, and later on we will do some demos about that too. So thank you, and watch the next video about more networking.